Welcome, fellow jarheads, to Tales from the Jar Side, the newsletter/video series from Cousin IT. So this week's title is JUnit Assumptions, Barbenheimer, Elon hits rock bottom and starts digging, Tesla lies, and more Toots and Skeets and other posts. The subtitle this week is 15 plus 15 is 30. 16 plus 16 is 32. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. So, welcome. This is the Cousin IT newsletter for the week of July 23rd through 30th, 2023. This week, I only had one online course. It was my Managing Your Manager course on the O'Reilly Learning Platform. It was a very active group, by the way. It was a lot of fun, actually. Regular readers of and listeners to, and of course video viewers of this newsletter are affectionately known as jarheads and are far more intelligent, sophisticated, and attractive than the average newsletter reader or listener or viewer, or even the above average reader or listener or viewer. If you wish to become a jarhead, please subscribe using the button on the newsletter. It is time for our weekly check-in on the YouTube channel. Let's see how that's doing this week. We are up to 489 subscribers. Growth has slowed a little bit because I haven't actually put up that many videos recently. I've been planning a couple of them, but I'm trying to raise the production quality, and that's, of course, everything's taking longer than I expected. At any rate, so nothing here that I want to review. Let's just go back to the newsletter this time. So this first section is the technical one for the week. Feel free to skip it if you like. I should note that there are timestamps at the bottom of the video, so you can skip forward. The title of this subsection is Never Assume or You Make a Donkey Out of You and Me. Wait a minute, where's my rim shot there? There we go. Although I said it as never assume unless you're using JUnit 5. So when I started my career change, I was a research scientist and an engineer at United Technologies Research Center from the late 80s, so roughly 88, October of 88 until 2000. So when I started my career change from that into IT, which started around 1997, I think, then I went back to school at night in what they called Rensselaer at Hartford. They had just called it the Hartford, changed it from the Hartford Graduate Center. Rensselaer at Hartford had just become a division of RPI based in Hartford, Connecticut. It's now called Rensselaer at Work, as you can see here. It is purely at night. It is only for master's degrees exclusively. They only have, I think, 3 programs. I think they've got engineering and computer science and management. And that's pretty much it. At least that's the way it was when I went there. I went at night, 1 night a week for each course for approximately 2.5 years to get my master's in computer science. One of the first courses I took was an introduction to object-oriented programming. Now, I was familiar with Java, but not good at it yet. I was just getting the feel for it. So this was Java 1.0, 1.1, getting into 1.2 during my career there. And I took a course called Object-Oriented. Actually, the name of the course was Object-Oriented Programming. And I'm blanking on the professor's name. I've been racking my brain over him, and I can't remember his name, which bugs me because I can picture the guy clear as day. But he left the university not long after I graduated, and I don't know where he is now, so I don't know how to find him. At any rate, he taught a course that used a text called Object-Oriented Software Construction by Bertrand Meyer. Now, this is a very famous text in the field, very well known in the classic literature by the object-oriented programming people. And it introduced a programming language that was called Eiffel. I did open the Wikipedia page for that. Here is Eiffel, and it's still around, apparently. First appeared in 1986, so it was pretty shiny and new when I was dealing with it these days. And according to this, it's still going strong. It still exists out there. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just in the wrong area, but I don't know anybody using it. I haven't met anybody who's used it since I left, although I've met a couple people that heard of it anyway. They do say it was an ISO standard language in 2005, and this is the key phrase right here, many of the concepts introduced by Eiffel later found their way into Java or C# and other programming languages, although there were a lot that haven't. I mean, Eiffel had multiple inheritance and ways to uninherit things so that you got to pick, if you had a conflict, which one you wanted. It was really kind of a neat language. Anyway, one of the things that it taught me that I did not know at all at the time was something called design by contract. And I put the link there for the Wikipedia page for design by contract as well. This was Bertrand Meyer's big contribution, if you will, and they reference the book and everything else, and they describe it and on and on. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail, but I do want to give you a little bit of a flavor of why I'm kind of excited about how JUnit 5 handles this stuff. The idea of design by contract is that every method in a class would have preconditions and postconditions around it. Now, preconditions are Boolean conditions that have to be satisfied when you call the method if you want there to be any chance that the postconditions, when you're done, are true. And this simple, trivial example I used in the newsletter was to say, imagine I ask you to do a task for me. The preconditions would be things like, who are you? Why can you tell me what to do? Do you have a budget for this? Do you have a project number, as we used to say at the research center? Do I have time to do it? Do I have, I mean, if that's for you, actually, do you have time to do it? Do you have the materials to do it? Do you have the expertise to do it? All of those things, some of which I have control over, some of which I don't. But if those preconditions aren't satisfied, then there's no chance that the postcondition will be satisfied, which is, here, the project's done and it's working. So I need the preconditions in order to satisfy the postconditions. Now, Java has never really had pre and post conditions built into it. There have been libraries through the years to do this, but none of them ever really caught on, or at least I never ran into anybody using them extensively. And in fact, instead of that, they often use exceptions for precondition checks. I mean, what is a null pointer exception other than a precondition failure? But we'll come back to that. In JUnit 5, JUnit Jupyter, they pushed a class called Assumptions. Now, JUnit 4 had this too, but it really is important in JUnit 5. And I put a link to the JUnit documentation to the section on assumptions, which says JUnit Jupyter comes with a subset of the assumption methods in JUnit 4. I'm not sure what they were in JUnit 4. I never saw anybody use them. And adds a few that lend themselves well to being used with lambda expressions and method references. And they have a handful of them here. These are okay. I don't find them terribly motivating. So instead, I want to show you an alternative. Now, this is one that I have in my own workshop, but I think I got originally from the JUnit documentation, and it's called Pop on an Empty Stack. Now, one person did point out in a reply that that title might be a bit misleading. What I'm really trying to say is if you call pop on an empty stack, I would like this test to be skipped because the stack is empty. You shouldn't call pop on an empty stack. Now, by the way, if you call pop on an empty stack in regular Java, it throws an empty stack exception, as you might expect. So here we add in this assume true method, which is a static method from the assumptions class in JUnit 5. And our assumption is that the size of the stack is greater than 0. The stack is not empty. You're able to put in an error message too, which is fine. I'm a little disappointed that when the assumption fails, that error message is not reflected in the output anywhere in IntelliJ or in Gradle. I mean, it's not up to the library to say where the output should be or how the output should be displayed, but I hope at some point they do wind up displaying that. At any rate, I'm making this assumption that the size is greater than 0, and if that fails, as it will here when I have an empty stack, then we should not call pop at all because it has no chance of being successful. See, now pop is a method in the library, and I don't go around testing library methods very often. But if I'm writing my own method and I want to test it to make sure it's working, Well, I don't want to see a failure that had nothing to do with how I wrote the method. I mean, I don't want it to fail because the the site's down or the thing doesn't work or some precondition was violated. And that's what this does. It actually doesn't fail. It's skipped. As soon as it sees that the assumption is not satisfied, the rest of the test is skipped. And we just get an output like this. Now, let me just show it to you. Here's an example in a GitHub repository that I'll post in the description. But if I run this test here, let me execute this, and you see that on this particular method, pop on an empty stack, what IntelliJ shows is a circle with a line through it, meaning the test was, quote, ignored, or more formally skipped, not more formally, but more accurately, it just got skipped here. And that's because the assumption failed. And that's what assume true does. It says, throws a test aborted exception, if you want to say it that way. You can do that also. Whereas once I did add an element to the stack, when I did a push, then that one ran and everything is fine. And there's also an assert false method, and here an assuming that method, which tried to do both, says, hey, if the stack is not empty, then call pop. I'm not as wild about the one that combines them. I don't think it's as obvious what's going on there, though of course it does work. This is just the demonstration that without any of these assumptions, that Java uses exceptions for the precondition failure rather than that. So what's the bottom line here? When you call pop on a stack, you should get back the top element, and there should be one less element, or is that one fewer element? I guess technically one fewer, but both of them sound weird to me. One fewer element on the stack. And those are only going to be true if the stack was not empty when you called pop. So that's the idea. So I already explained all of this. And again, since Java never had precondition checks, it used the empty stack exception as a precondition failure. Now, technically, according to design by contract, exceptions are supposed to happen if the preconditions do pass, and for some weird reason, the postcondition fails anyway, because that means you have a bug. That's where exceptions are supposed to happen. Not everywhere like in Java, because they're used for precondition checks as well. I'm planning a video on this. I'm still trying to figure out exactly how to say it all in a way that might not just be useful, but also mildly entertaining. That'll probably come out this week. At least I'm aiming for that. But now let's move on to our next section. Okay, this is another section revisiting the whole Barbenheimer double feature here, which was very clever, and it's rapidly losing its attraction, the term I mean, because movie studios are already trying to say, wow, that boosted both movies. Let's leverage that for any two random pair of movies that happen to be coming out on the same day. And now it all feels like they're draining the fun out of it. I mean, it was enjoyable for a little while. So what I want to say, however, is, hey, this week I finished a project. I rewarded myself by going to see Oppenheimer. Now, that's a pretty heavy movie to reward yourself with, but still, and it was phenomenal. I mean, as I say here, the acting was fantastic. I mean, the cast is brilliant. The cinematography and the effects are amazing, and I had to put this semi-footnote here to say I referred to the movie's cinematography and effects as though I have any idea what I'm talking about, meaning I really am a YouTuber, right? Anyway, the pace moved right along. It's a 3-hour movie, but it doesn't feel like that at all. It just very, very entertaining and well done. Of course, after I got home, I started looking at the videos of commentary about the movie, the ones I had to avoid until I'd seen the movie. And I've seen 3 or 4 of them now from reviewers that I really respect. And I learned, which parts really were history, which parts were a little bit dicey, what was the actual chronological order, what happened to these guys after the movie ended, all that kind of stuff. It's very, very interesting. The only heavy part, of course, is it makes you contemplate, thermonuclear war. I want to go back to the war game, shall we play a game, and all of that, which, again, my generation, if you want to roll your eyes and say, okay, boomer, I have no real defense. The only story I have that's kind of personal in all this is when I was a freshman at MIT and dinosaurs roam the earth. I read Richard Feynman's autobiography called Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman. I put a link to that, again, to the Wikipedia page about it. That's what the cover looked like. This came out in 85. I was, really? Couldn't possibly be 85. I read it long before that, so that's got to be a paperback or something, because I was at MIT from 80 to 84, so I know I read it well before then. So, okay, but I did, boy, I'm going to have to reconcile that, or maybe I'm losing my connection to reality here. You know, I mean, after all, it's a Christopher Nolan movie. Time travel is always involved. He always plays with time here. It's a lot of stories told by Feynman, and they are very entertaining. It wasn't until much later that I learned about his, really problematic behavior personally, especially with regard to women. I mean, there's even apparently he hit on one of his own grad students' wives at the time. I mean, it's really inappropriate stuff. So there's some criticism and things like that, but there's not a lot in the Wikipedia page. What I did remember, however, is he told a story about he was a very young physicist at Los Alamos. He was there during the Manhattan Project, and he was involved, although I don't know if he was the key player, but he was involved in one of the first recorded discussions about parallel computing. At the time, computer didn't mean hardware. I mean, the computer hadn't been invented yet. Of course, you had Alan Turing working during World War II at Bletchley Park with his cohorts in the UK, coming under all his abuse and everything. But the whole idea of a computer was still being invented. Von Neumann had been around, but this was really shiny and new. Instead, the term computer meant one of the many women who filled a room with adding machines who used to do these heavy calculations they had to do as part of the Manhattan Project. So they would feed cards through this series of calculators, if you will, to perform numerical calculations. And occasionally there'd be errors and they'd have to put in new cards that had that error fixed. But they discovered that they could change colors on these cards and pass in cards of different colors to not only do error checking, but also do additional calculations as well, and thereby do what was essentially parallel programming by hand. And there's a story he tells about a supervisor walking into the room and wondering what the heck is going on. And they had to just drive him out because any distraction was going to make the whole house of cards, so to speak, fall apart. So not a surprise. Oh, I guess I should, yep, hang on. There we go. Okay, so I told the story about that, and I do remember that from the book, although I haven't read that book since the 80s, whenever the heck it was. And that's my Manhattan Project story. That's about all I knew about it. I will say, by the way, one time while I was at MIT, Feynman came to visit. They did no publicity about it whatsoever. And yet word got around and he gave a talk in the biggest lecture hall they had. And there were people standing in the aisles. I managed to squeeze in the very back just to see him for a couple minutes, and I wasn't going to understand anything he was talking about anyway. I was, it's a freshman, sophomore, whatever. I do vaguely remember him addressing the possibility of negative probabilities occurring during a calculation as long as they were still zero or positive when the calculation was over. So go figure. I have no idea whether that went anywhere or not. Let's move on. Now, I did take the opportunity. I've been playing a lot with the AI tools. I think I've talked about that in previous newsletters. And one of the things that I played with a little bit this week was the code interpreter plugin inside of GPT-4. And I don't have it running here, but let me just open that up. So here is chat.openai.com. And if I go to GPT-4 and I select code interpreter, then I can do something like saying, let's see what question I put in, generate an image of the Mandelbrot set, one of the most entertaining fractals in the set there. And of course, it spits out a description of what the Mandelbrot set is about. It looks very nice. I mean, they did the equations and everything correctly. And what it's doing is it's generating code in Python and then running it. And if I click on the show your work, you can actually see the Python code being written out here. Well, that is quite a different picture than it generated the last time I did it, when it put an example inside, the example I put inside the newsletter. This time it plotted it on a different scale. I mean, you still get the Mandelbrot bug and everything, but there it is. And there's a little discussion of what it's all about. Incidentally, just for your information, one of the new features in ChatGPT is you could set up custom instructions and tell it something about where you're based and who you are and what you do for work and that, and something about how you want it to answer, how formal or casual and how long or short and all that stuff. And therefore, the first time I asked it to tell me about the Mandelbrot set without the code interpreter, it gave me Java code because it knew I tend to code in Java. Oh well, interesting. Just thought I'd show you that. Let's go back to the newsletter. So here was the one I put inside the newsletter. Now I got a different one this time. And that happened very, very quickly. It took longer when I did it in front of you. I cut out the delay there, but that was random. It sets up its own little Python sandbox and runs inside there. Okay. Oh, and I did mention one time back in the 90s, I had a 486 machine, an Intel 486 chip, 80486, and I set up a calculation of the Mandelbrot set, and I let it run on that thing for about a week. And of course, it wasn't nearly the resolution or the scale or anything of what you just saw. But life has changed. As for the other half of the Barbenheimer double feature, I have not seen the Barbie movie yet, but I have seen some videos. I decided I didn't mind getting some spoilers on the Barbie movie, and I was curious. So I'll just tell you this one story and then let it go for a while. And it is that in high school, I went on a single date with a woman named Barbara. And neither of us thought anything of it at the time. But as soon as she got home, apparently all her friends put our first names together. And we were then doomed. Ken and Barbie, yes, it was not going to happen. Not in high school, not at the time. Now, given my first name, of course, I do have to see the Barbie movie, but I think I can wait until it hits one of the streaming services. And besides, I don't own any pink shirts. Now, I have a red shirt, and I'm sure I have a white shirt somewhere. I could probably make one, in the washing machine. No, I'll get something pink. I don't know. We'll see. Let's move on to the next section. Okay, well, that was the fun stuff. Now the depressing issues. Elon he just knows no bounds. I mean, I tried to say he hit rock bottom and decided to keep digging. So just when you thought the bar for Elon's behavior could go no lower, he buried it. So I'm only going to mention the whole change to X, the fact that on a whim, without any permits or any warning to his own CEO, among other people, he just changed the name of the company to X, which he's always wanted to do. And it's a really stupid thing to do. I mean, Meta and Microsoft already have trademarks around X involving social media sites. He didn't even pick a real icon. He basically just took the Unicode character, meaning you cannot trademark it even if you wanted to. And then the guy who lucked into the Twitter handle @X when he first joined Twitter, was one of the first couple hundred people to join the site, has not done a lot with it, but they just took it away from him. They offered him some merch and they offered him a tour of headquarters, like that's going to matter to anybody, and then just took it because they can. Oh, it was just appalling. The whole thing is just ridiculous. I found out, by the way, this morning that in the Apple Store, I don't think I put it there, but there was somewhere the Apple Store that pointed out that you can't have an app with a single letter name. So it's still called Twitter there. And most of the site still has Twitter all over it. The whole thing is just mind-numbingly stupid. But that's Elon all over. Right. And of course, most of the time, X conjures porn associations. I mean, don't accidentally go to X videos thinking you're going to see a video on Twitter, because you're not. So the moderators at Twitter then, oh yeah, just to make things worse, suspended a user over a post that contained photos from a notorious child pornography video that's on this giant list that they always filter. And Elon went and reinstated the guy almost right away for no good reason. Clearly, the name X didn't have enough porn associations for Elon. Yeah, there's an article here which maybe I'll share out next week, but it just says Twitter threatens legal action against a nonprofit that tracks hate speech because, of course, it was going to hurt his business. A nonprofit that just tracks it, but that Elon can't handle that, you know. Oh my goodness. There was more, and that's just enough. I left personally. I stopped using Twitter a couple of weeks ago, and I haven't really looked back. I do post the newsletter there. I mention when I have a new video or something major, but I try to spend as little time there as possible. I don't want to leave. I don't want to deactivate my account because then someone else could take that same Twitter handle later, and I'll hang on to it. And there are some good people still there. I don't know why, but they're there. But I'm not visiting any at all. Now, just as a quick review of the rest of the social media landscape, I am happy with Mastodon. I catch up there every day. On Blue Sky, it turns out it's a lot more entertaining to follow the feeds that aren't just the people that you follow. I didn't realize that at first. And looking at the Discover feed, I mean, most of these other sites where they have an algorithmic feed, I don't like the algorithmic feed. But on Blue Sky, they're actually pretty good ones. So I'm spending a little more time there, not a lot. Another jarhead suggested I try out post.news, and I did try that, and it's okay. It's basically journalism, but I forget that it exists, and I don't do a lot with it, but it is there. LinkedIn actually is taking more of my time than I expected, mostly because they're feeding traffic to my YouTube channel. I'm not sure why, but looking at the feed there gets annoying pretty quickly because there's so many marketing people and quote influencers and people trying to sell you something. It's just not that fun. But there's some good stuff there. Now, I guess it's probably an age thing, or it's me. I'm just not an Instagram person. I never took a whole lot of pictures. I also don't trust Zuckerberg any more than I trust Musk. Well, no, more than Musk, I guess. But wow, I mean, I don't trust Zuckerberg as an amoral robot. No, I don't have any faith in him at all. And therefore, I don't really want to give anything to him either. And that's Instagram. But okay, I don't mind other people doing it, and I do have an account there. That's how I was able to join Threads, is it just took all my Instagram graph, I guess, and did that. And, you know, Threads, the usage there has dropped by like 75%, and I glance at it. Again, there's a few people that are interesting, but mostly I don't need it. I certainly don't do TikTok. I really believe it's completely subject to the whims of the Chinese government, and why should I make it easier for them to grab all the information off my phone? No, I'm not going to do that. Substack Notes, which apparently made Elon all upset that one time, that's pretty useless. I mean, it's there, and I post something every now and again. I glance at it, but I'll be surprised if that has a long life cycle. I still go to Facebook every week to post the newsletter, but I don't spend much time there. My wife reads Facebook, and she spends time looking at, I guess those are reels, you know, the videos that are the shorts on Facebook, which came from Instagram. She likes those, so I go there occasionally. I do have some friends there. And of course, like most people, you know, years ago, my high school graduating class formed a group for the reunion. I guess it must have been 20 or 30 year reunion. And I joined that, and it didn't take long for me to remember why I didn't keep in touch with most of those people. There are some I still would like to keep in touch with, but not that many, and I'm happy I'm out. So I don't go there often. Reddit, I tried periodically. Every once in a while I'll give it a try, but it's got the best and the worst of Usenet groups, and I don't really need that in my life. I do glance at it. I certainly don't do anything like Hacker News. I don't need that kind of abuse in my life there. I can't think of other social media sites, although I guess I should say I do post a fair number of things on Medium, but that's because that's where Pragmatic Programmers has their publication, and that helps support my book, so I've been supporting them. I don't know if I'll continue to do that too much either. So my social media activity these days is mostly YouTube and Mastodon, with a little blue sky thrown in for seasoning, as I say, but this could all change in the next few months. Let's move on to the next section. And your little Tesla, too. I'll get you, my pretty. As if there wasn't enough bad Elon-related news this week, I saw this incredible article from Reuters. Let me open that up here. And it's Tesla created a secret team to suppress thousands of driving range complaints. I can't read the whole thing without getting angry. I mean, I own a Tesla, and I do still have my bumper sticker here. I have not yet, put that on my car yet, but I'm getting pretty close to doing it. It says, if you can't read it says Elon Musk is slime. I just like the car. And I do like the car, but oh my goodness. Yeah, I know from the beginning the battery life was never anywhere near what was advertised. Now, I also know that for regular cars, miles per gallon estimates from the dealership are worthless as well. Everybody exaggerates that stuff. But I was not initially prepared for how much of a drop there was going to be. Now, I still have enough range that it's not an issue for me. But when you read in that article and find out that that the range estimates drop so fast until you hit 50%, and then they're far more accurate, which is also my experience. And they added an extra 15 miles when it says 0, which bailed me out once, but I wish I'd known about that ahead of time, Well, apparently the behavior of the estimates was so different from what it was telling you that a lot of people reported a defective battery or they wanted it checked. They turned the car in for maintenance. And the claim is that was costing Tesla like $1,000 for each of these visits, although I don't know why. But all right, so be it. So Elon came up with a brilliant idea of forming a team basically to pretend like they were doing a remote diagnostic and then canceling the appointments, telling these people that their battery was fine. And they even counted it as responding if they called and nobody answered. If they managed to get nobody there, they say, yeah, well, we tried and that's it. They just stopped. And then people who did report an error were no longer allowed to report any other issue with their car for a while. Oh, it just goes on. And it's so staggeringly unethical and just downright evil that I'm disgusted. I don't even know what to say anymore, except that I still like the car. I don't have a lot of mileage on it. I'm going to keep it. But yeah, that bumper sticker's going on there soon. I'll simply say this. Most people don't hear me use profanity. I try to go out of my way not to. But there are 3 situations where I do use profanity. One is when I'm driving, not a big surprise, most people. Also, when I'm working with computers, again, not a big surprise. People forget why it's called a cursor, after all. Right? And, of course, now it's whenever Elon does yet another thing that is both cruel and or stupid. That used to be Roger Goodell. I can't stand Roger Goodell. He's the most entitled, arrogant, self-important, puffed-up suit I've ever seen, and makes ridiculous decisions on a whim that are completely irrational and unfair. And if you are a fan of either New England or the New Orleans Saints, you know about this. I can't stand that guy. And yet Musk has gone up higher on the level than Roger Goodell. So he's still sitting there in 4th, I guess. We'll see. Let's move on to something more pleasant. Our Toots and Skeets and other posts. I have to retire the phrase tweets and toots, which I've been using for weeks here because of man-baby Elon. I mean, there are no such thing as tweets anymore, right? So I'll go with Toots and Skeets and others, but it's awkward. If you've got a suggestion, please let me know. I thought this was clever. Somebody put up a picture of the Zoom offices and said, why does Zoom have offices, right? I mean, it's all remote, isn't it? That's a good question. Although I've noticed that's pretty common among the sites that involve tools that let you work remotely. They're the ones who want people in an office right away. That means something, although I'm not sure what. This was a good life lesson. It said one of the hardest lessons I've had to learn, but it changed everything. I think I can magnify that a bit. No, apparently not. The flowchart says, I want to do this. And one side says, do it. And the other side says, but I'm scared. And then it says, do it scared. Good point. I'm kind of stuck in a couple of those right now. Back to Barbenheimer, or this is actually Barbenheimer, which I thought was a riot. This was a picture of Barbenheimer. And if you don't get the association, Hemmer on the right-hand side here was the chief engineer on the Enterprise in the first season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. So very clever, very good. This one was for those people who know binary. The top one says, your crush knows binary, and he's all happy. And the second one says, they think you're a 10, and he's all happy. And then he realizes what it means if they think you're a 10. So that's 0 in the 1s column and 1 in the 2s column. Not good. My favorite variation on the binary joke is that there are 10 kinds of people, those who know binary, those who don't, and those who didn't realize this is actually a ternary joke. I should have that ready. Okay. More about the change from Twitter to X. John Scalzi wrote a wonderful blog post I really liked on his blog called Whatever. And this was a snippet out of that said Twitter was a place with people, and Musk took a city with thriving neighborhoods and decided to run a freaking interstate, see what I mean, through the most interesting parts of it. And the interstate doesn't actually go anywhere good. It just runs from Bitcoin town to Fascistburg. And I did put a link directly to that blog post here. And here it is. It was called Preparing My Exit. And yeah, it's much the same as the reasons were pretty much the same as mine. I agreed with it. This was a nice little image of the dead parrot sketch showing it was alive when you bought it. It's got Elon with a dead Twitter bird, you know. And this one, of course, was the Planet of the Apes, Charlton Heston going, you maniacs, you blew it up. Damn you all to hell. Yeah, I gotta agree. This one I really liked because of the math involved. They're showing the C with the complex numbers and the natural numbers. Notice how these all have the double lines in them. That's just a syntax that's often used to represent these sets. Complex natural numbers, rational numbers, the real numbers. And then, of course, X is the set of fascist wannabes and Z is the integers. Yeah, I thought that was really good. Okay, getting away from all that nonsense. I like this one. Said this meeting could have been a nap. And yeah, I'll get right on that. Good idea. I thought this was great from Shakespeare. I didn't go to Twitter to see this. Somebody quoted it and I just took a picture of it. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Fine. Thou art a sticky, uncomfortable mess, and thou goest on and on interminably. Art happy now? Shouldn't it be art thou happy now? I don't know. I'm not up on my Shakespearean grammar. Nevertheless, that's good, and I can't even imagine what he would have done with climate change. Credit where credit is due. This one said, hello, friends. This is Satan. I'm here to remind you that plagues, great floods, and pandemics are God's department. I just do orgies and metal bands. So, yeah, okay. Point taken. And then finally, emotional truth. Whoa, that got really big. That's too big. Let's cut that out. There. The grapes of wrath, Steinbeck, of course, apples of anger, the cantaloupes of cantankerousness, the plums of pique, and the bananas of just really happy to see you. Is that a banana in your pocket, or are you just happy to see me? Right. Wait a minute. Where's my... There we are. Have a great week, everybody. Last week I did my Managing Your Manager class. This week I've got a 2-day class in the APAC time zone on functional Java. But again, that's it. So hopefully that video will get made. Thank you very much for your attention, and I will see everybody next week. Take care.